What is up, guys? Welcome to this video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about closed-mindedness as a defense mechanism. Now, this video is going to be for anyone who wants to understand people a little bit more, who wants to understand human conflict a little bit more, who wants to understand themselves a little bit more, and basically anyone who wants to understand how beliefs work a little bit more. So this video is basically going to be quite a bit about human psychology and why we are so closed-minded and how it kind of works. Now, closed-mindedness is actually, like the title says, a defense mechanism. And on the board here, I have a belief system. But first, I gotta say one thing. Even if you think of yourself as an open-minded individual, I want you to really consider the opposite. That there are times and certain ideas that you are just not open to because they threaten you. They're so threatening to the ideas that you believe are true, that you will basically just close your mind to them entirely. And I like to think of myself as a very open-minded guy. I read a lot of books from so many traditions. I'm not very tied down to any ideology or any belief system or philosophy. I have no loyalty to any group whatsoever. And I like to think about what ideas am I just really close to? And I like to seriously just try and think about what worldviews am I potentially just completely closed-minded to, or worldviews that I don't understand. And closed-mindedness is simply a way of maintaining your sense of self. So even if you're very open-minded, like me, I'm very open-minded, probably far more open-minded than the vast majority of people on this planet. Sounds kind of arrogant, but it's kind of true. I actively work on being more open-minded, which is pretty rare. But enough of me being so full of myself. If you like to think of yourself as open-minded, basically, you're not. If you really want to be open-minded, you actually have to actively go into your own mind and your own emotions and your own instincts and see where they are very closed off. And you will definitely find a lot of very closed off parts of yourself when you begin to examine what's really going on inside your mind, maybe through like a meditation practice or even reading some books on psychotherapy or shadow work, things like this. Now, closed-mindedness is a way for someone to maintain their beliefs and to maintain themselves, because we have something called a psychological self, or basically a self-image, a self-concept, a self-picture. And this self-picture is who we believe we are. It's how we identify ourselves. And I would like to ask you, what do you believe you are? And any answer that you generate to that question, I want you to realize that that is just a thought. That is not an actual, tangible thing that you are. This is just an idea that floated into your mind from who knows where and then passed. It came into your awareness and then it left. So the identity of being black, being white, these are thoughts. Okay, you're going to really have to watch your mind, like actively watch your mind generate a thought and then watch yourself identify with that particular thought, with that particular belief, with that particular self-concept. I'm big, I'm small, ugly, stupid, smart, handsome. I'm a father, I'm a mother. I am a brother, sister. I'm male, female. I want you to get that these are thoughts, okay? And I really want you to get that there is a constructed identity that you think you are. Okay? And really, This is no simple thing, okay? This psychological self, your name, where you're from, all this stuff, this is very important to your sense of safety. It determines what you believe you should do, what you believe you shouldn't do, the kinds of people you should be with, the kinds of people you shouldn't be with. This says a lot about how you view the world and what you think it is. And this psychological self is not actually real. It's only real for as long as you like to imagine that it is. This self that you believe that you are is not real. It sounds very twisted, almost like sick, to say that you have no actual self inside of you, really. There's no actual identity that you can think of that you actually are, because those are all thoughts, they're all fantasy, they're all imagination. It's actually an ongoing process of our mind deceiving itself, our mind just deluding itself into believing that we are a particular way. And this belief actually makes our sense of self seem like this continuous, objective, independently existing thing separate from basically everyone and everything else, that has an inherent existence of its own, but in actuality, in direct experience, that isn't what's happening. That is a construct. And you can look into the neuroscience of no self. That would be very beneficial to you if you are raging at what I'm saying. But this is actually something that mankind has known about for thousands of years. The Buddhists, thousands of years ago, the Buddha, there was many, but the famous Buddha, the most famous Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, discovered what was called the truth of no self and emptiness. And that's a pretty complicated thing that I'm not really going to get into in this video. But the idea of no self, the idea that what we believe we are is a construct, this is a radical thing and will not be taken lightly by our psychological self. So if you're new to this idea, if you haven't heard of it before, you can find your mind battling and struggling against it, saying it must be bullshit, this guy must be stupid, it must be wrong, etc. Buddhism, what is that? Religious horse shit. It might be a bit of what you're saying, but psychology actually backs it up. Neuroscience backs it up. So this sense of who we are, this idea of who we are, actually defends itself through closed-mindedness, through things like projection, through projecting our beliefs and our emotions and our misperceptions onto other people by being very closed to anything that can potentially threaten our belief system. And furthermore, this psychological self is simultaneously the actual cause of 99% of human psychological suffering. It's this strong, fixed and rigid sense of we are this particular way. It's actually this delusion that holds together a lot of our psychological trauma, a lot of our repressed emotions, and a lot of our basically inner garbage that makes us suffer. All of the instincts that we have that only create more suffering, all the beliefs we have that only create more suffering, all the repressed emotions we have that dictate a lot of our beliefs and our actions and our ways of relating that create more suffering. So this sounds like a pretty large topic, that there's this thing, I guess in our mind, there's this tendency for our mind to imagine ourselves to be a certain thing, and that creates 99% of our suffering. That's a pretty grand statement for me to make on freaking YouTube. But nonetheless, this is something that actually can be observed for yourself, which we did that practice just 2 seconds ago. But it's easier if you have some skills meditating, because then you actually gain direct observation into the workings of your own mind. You gain a lot more direct experience, a lot more clarity, a lot more emotional intelligence, a lot more self-awareness, and a sense of detachment and distance from thought, which for the most part, if you're honest with yourself, thought kind of has you in its grips constantly. You think something, you feel really attached to it, you feel very identified with the thinking process. And because we feel so identified with this thinking process, anything that potentially threatens these thoughts, this whole thinking game, this house of cards we construct with our mind, anything that potentially threatens this, it seems like a direct attack on ourself, because we are so attached and identified with these beliefs, these thoughts, with this whole pattern, this activity. Our actual self is not a fixed, rigid thing. It's an activity, it's a doing, it's a sort of acting, it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's flexible, it's changing. It's not a static, rigid thing. It's not like I was born, on this day and I'm still like just the same person. My whole body has reconfigured itself. My whole mind has restructured itself. Everything is different. Every single thing has changed. And things continue to change nonstop. Me this moment versus me 5 seconds ago is very different. Things have vibrated, changed, rearranged itself. Ideas have come and go. Feelings and sensations have came and went. So our identity, if we begin to explore it, we really find that there's nothing objective and tangible there. It's simply an artificial construction. And this has a lot of implications to it, not only in our actual personal lives and the way we relate to each other, but actually even metaphysically as well. But that's kind of a dorky topic, a little bit too complicated for this video. But I'm going to get right back to this one. So this is a belief system, and I thought it would help to just draw it out. And I want you to notice that, the letter B stands for belief. I want you to notice how interconnected every belief is. And I really want you to get that, first of all, there's no escaping a belief system. Just being human means you'll have a belief system. Basically, right now, you believe that I am going to continue acting in this certain way that I am. For example, you might think that I might continue talking. You don't think I'm going to, let's say, do this. So you have this sort of constantly expecting, predicting mind. So you have very micro beliefs to very macro beliefs, small to large. You might believe that the earth is round or flat. And that is a belief. Unless you've actually been to space and have actually directly verified it for yourself, this is just an idea that you've adopted, regardless of whether you think it's flat or round. Now, I really want you to get that everything in a belief system is interconnected. So it's not like we have, let's say, a belief and it's like this sort of arbitrary thing almost. It can be somewhat arbitrary, but it's not just this sort of random thing. For the sake of the example, I'll just go along with this. It's not just this purely random thing that's just very innocent and doesn't have an effect on, let's say, our whole life, the way we relate, and of course the way we think. It actually has massive effects on every aspect of our life. And every single belief we have is connected to another belief. And when we begin to go and question a belief, let's say we question this belief and we get rid of it. But now that belief was connected to this belief. And now that one is beginning to be seen through. Okay, and now that belief, these beliefs, were connected to this belief right here. And now this belief is sort of vanishing. It's being questioned, it's being seen. And it's only a matter of time until this one, all of these begin to just go up in smoke, begin to vanish. Now, a belief system is something that our mind constructs in order to survive. It saves us a lot of energy. It saves us a lot of mental energy. So being able to, let's say, have a belief about what the world is, what this present moment is right now. What is this moment? We have a lot of ideas that this is, let's say, a room or a YouTube video, or this is me, I'm a human, my body. Having these beliefs and basically filling in our sense of not knowing with a belief actually just saves us a lot of energy. Because once we fill in that sense of not knowing with a belief, now we have the sense that we actually know what's going on here. And we cling to that. We find a lot of security in that. And when that happens, we feel less of a need to spend energy on actually investigating what reality is. We then can turn to, let's say, just getting food or having sex, basically getting our survival needs met so that we can continue to live, which is great, nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that this is very unsatisfactory. Living in this sort of animalistic way is extremely unsatisfactory. It's just not really going to give you a happy life. It's just going to leave you kind of feeling empty and like you've just lived your life like a dog, basically. Like you've just been eating and sleeping and shitting and having sex. And this whole sort of animalistic approach to life, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just that our psyche has needs that are past it. Our mind actually needs to self-actualize in order to feel well. Our psyche actually needs to self-transcend in order to be well. These are psychological needs. Just like how we have, let's say some physiological needs like calcium. When we don't get enough calcium, we feel deficient. Our body actually has a deficiency. When we don't get the safety that we need, when we don't have the love we need, the self-esteem, self-actualization, self-transcendence, when we don't have these things, we actually feel deficient. We have basically disease in our mind, which also affects our body. And this is obviously not desirable if you want to live a good life. And even though a lot of this stuff may seem abstract, it really isn't. This is your life we're talking about. This is who you believe you are, what you believe the world is, and your entire relationship to all of life, basically, is very deeply determined by your beliefs, by the amount of openness you have to basically new things, and why basically our minds are so rigid, and a lot more, but I'll leave it at that for now. But I really want you to get that our belief system takes on a life of its own, and that when really it's threatened, our psychological self actually actively defends it. Of course, we all know that people defend beliefs all the time, but our psychological self protects it as though we are under physical danger, like we're actually being physically threatened. And this sort of mechanism is not a bad thing. It's responsible for keeping us alive. It's homeostasis. And it's helping us to, of course, avoid death, but also it keeps our fear of death sort of below our radar, below conscious awareness. And of course, if you want to grow yourself to the highest levels of human development, you're going to really have to understand how your fears work, how homeostasis works, how beliefs work. This is just going to be essential when you get to certain levels of development. And since our belief system and our ego, our identity, since these things like to maintain themselves, if we don't have a clear understanding of how they work and how they are constructed and how it defends itself, we are going to inevitably get stuck in a lot of areas in life, hitting our head against the wall in our relationships, in our skills in life, our social skills, our emotional skills, our creative work, things like this, we are just inevitably going to get stuck. And our identity is obviously very wrapped in with our belief system, but it's very wrapped up in the actual closed-mindedness mechanism itself, where some sort of idea comes into your awareness, and very quickly, basically below your awareness, below your conscious discernment, for the most part, unless you're fairly developed, fairly conscious, you immediately determine whether this idea is safe or dangerous, whether it fits into your current belief system or whether it doesn't. And you bring this to every situation in your life. When you're in the grocery store buying food, to when you're with your boyfriend or girlfriend, to when you're at work or creating something. If you come across information that doesn't fit the pre-existing model of reality that you have, the pre-existing belief system, you typically close your mind to it. Or you not only close your mind to it, you also begin to project onto the person who began to kind of shake up your belief system. You begin to think that this person is just an idiot, that this person is just stupid, that they don't know what they're saying, they don't know what they're talking about, that they're foolish, that what they're saying is just wrong, and etc. Along this sort of line of reasoning. And it's very interesting when we begin to examine where we even got our beliefs from, because like I said, a belief isn't just an arbitrary thing, although it somewhat is as well. It's a bit paradoxical because a belief has a sort of purpose to it, and at the same time, they're really the reasons as to why we adopted the beliefs that we have, and I really want to stress the word adopt here, is mainly because of the environment that we grew up in. So I live in Canada. A lot of the beliefs here are just the same beliefs. Basically, most people share the exact same worldviews. People are either atheists or theists. People are either liberals or conservatives. People are either Catholic or Muslim or Jews. And there's not much variety, really. It's very dull, lacking in nuance, lacking in creativity, lacking in perspective, lacking in intellectual curiosity of all the other views. These sort of habits of just being closed are basically utterly ridiculous. They're just a sign of a lack of psychological development. And not only that, the beliefs we have help us to survive. Like I said, they help us to maintain our sense of self in the environment that we're growing up in. The reason we adopted them is just to survive. And that really, depending, of course, on where you are from, you're going to have radically different beliefs. Like a person in India is going to adopt the beliefs of their culture, whereas a person who was born in Canada is going to adopt a lot of the beliefs of their culture. And it's very foolish to really think that your mind's model of reality is just the right one. It's ridiculous, really, when you think about it, because like the odds are just so low that you, of all people, of the 8 billion people on this planet, have the right view, and this other culture must be entirely wrong. Now, of course, a lot of you guys who are watching this video probably don't really think along those lines, but I want to open your mind to something very interesting that I learned from a guy named Ken Wilber. And he talked about something called a partial truth. And he says that everyone is right. Everyone is right. The human mind is too... I don't remember the word. I think he might have said the human mind is too smart to be wrong all the time. Something, I don't know if he said that, but it was along those lines. But he says that everyone's right, but people are right to varying degrees. And that every culture and every major worldview has some kind of accuracy in it, some little nugget of truth. And you might immediately bring up the worldviews that you hate the most and say, well, how can there be anything true in that worldview? And if you look honestly and sincerely and without emotional reactivity and without a sense of detachment, or with a sense of detachment, and with a sense of acceptance of the existence of the worldview, you can find some accuracy in it. And I want you to realize that people who are opposing you often see something that you don't. So a prime example is liberals and conservatives. There are actually stages of human development, and liberals and conservatives are at different stages of development. They have, of course, different values, different needs, different wants, different sort of agendas, although they are very similar as well. They also have huge psychological differences. Liberals tend to be more open, more dynamic and flexible. Liberals tend to be more closed, conscientious, and I guess rigid, but which there's ups and downs to both. And that within both of these views, there is a lot of accuracy and truth to what is really going on inside these people's minds. It's not so much that one is right to the exclusion of the other, but that they're both right, but that depending on the situation and depending on the context, one approach might be more valuable than another approach. And this is extremely important to recognize in the modern world, because we have a massive, culture war and a lot of ideology. Ideology is one of the largest traps that people can fall into and have fallen into. Everyone falls into this trap. But this is a serious problem that we don't know how the human mind works. Most people are very ignorant about it. Everyone's basically very ignorant about it. We don't know how ideology works. We don't even know why we believe the things we believe. We don't know why we have the preferences that we have. We don't know how our personality types work. People, for the most part, are very ignorant of these things about themselves that are so essential to our life. Like, why do we have the preferences we have? Abraham Maslow talked a bit about how a lot of people don't really know why they want the things they want. They just find themselves liking food or liking sex or liking connection. They just find themselves wanting it and liking it, but not really understanding why and not having a deep grasp of human needs, which is essential for really living a fantastic life. You need this kind of knowledge. You need this kind of self-understanding and also this sort of understanding of other people around you, because you're going to be living with a lot of people around you the rest of your life. And you have to learn to understand them and get along with them, really. Or else you're just going to be struggling against them for the rest of your life. You have to understand their level of development, different personality types, why people are the way they are. I'll just leave it at that. You have to really come to see the validity in what people are saying, but also not get trapped in what people are saying. Because a lot of people are closed-minded. A lot of people, for the most part, are stuck in some kind of ideological system that prevents their mind from actually growing to a higher stage of consciousness and psychological development. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that if you want to grow yourself, you're going to have to not do that. You're going to have to be fairly open, fairly flexible, fairly dynamic in your worldview, very adaptive and changing, and basically remove loyalty to any particular ideological system. So a lot of, let's say in politics, this is just such a perfect example. everyone just believes that they're right. Isn't that fantastic? That I believe I'm right, and you believe you're right, and they believe they're right, and they believe they're right, and we're all right, but at the same time, we have absolutely no idea why we can't get along and why people so strongly believe what they believe, because I'm so obviously right. My view is so obviously right. I vote with the facts. My views are the facts. Isn't that great? That they're just not reasonable enough. They're not rational enough. They're too soft. Isn't that interesting that my views are the facts and the other ones can't be, when meanwhile I think I'm right, you think you're right, you think you're right, and on it goes. Now, I really want to point out once again that the beliefs you hold are in fact things you've adopted in order to survive. People's beliefs are not reasonably held. This is a total delusion that we have. It's not based off rationality, it's based off emotion. We develop these beliefs in order to keep us safe and secure. Like a baby who's born into a conservative Christian household will most likely become a conservative Christian. A baby who's born into a liberal household is most likely going to be liberal, and etc. So the environment that we grow up in, of course, shapes us. This is not new to anyone, but we don't really understand the significance of that if we're being closed-minded. If we can't understand that this person who is different from me has grown up in a radically different context, they've come to see the world in a certain way, and it's not just stupid. There's wisdom in a lot of these belief systems, that it's not just foolishness, that actually the reason why people believe the things they believe is because there is in fact a kernel of truth in it that they actually love, that they actually adore. And of course, it also keeps them safe. So beliefs are basically very emotional things. And it's very obvious because if you start to get into a debate, a controversial debate with someone, it doesn't take long before things can potentially get heated. Unless, of course, you have a high enough degree of openness and acceptance of how the other person thinks. And what I'm talking about here is not this sort of hippy-dippy, we'll all just get along and love each other and accept each other kind of thing. But it's a lot more practical and a lot more to do with how your mind is actually interpreting reality and the actual consequences of that. It basically has a lot to do with how deeply do you want to understand the world. Now, when you're talking to someone who has different beliefs than you, who has radically different beliefs than you, it's very important to understand why that is the way they are, or why that is the way it is. And it's important to really begin to get an idea of what the needs of this worldview are. What the actual needs of this belief system is, basically, or what the needs of this belief system are. And all major belief systems actually work to target core needs in the human psyche, whether it's connection, belongingness, self-esteem, a sense of connection to mankind, compassion and empathy for one another, understanding, safety, things like this. So it's actually of immense value to really not have an ideological ground to stand on, or at least very little, because like I said, you can't ever avoid a belief system. But as people evolve psychologically, they actually do become more open-minded. They become less sort of violent towards other people with opposing beliefs. And I mean that in a very practical way. Like, people at high levels of psychological development cease to want to just control people in a very specific way. And controlling people is something that every human does. Every human actually likes to manipulate other humans to get the things that they want through arguing, fighting, anger, domination, and other tactics that are sort of naturally programmed in us, or just they're somewhat predetermined in a sense. We're kind of born with a lot of this stuff, and we have to really work it through, really become conscious of it and sort of clean it up inside of ourselves. So humans are fantastic deceivers and manipulators, and that involves, that includes you. That's really my point here, not those people out there. That includes you and me. And it's incredibly important to be able to, obviously get along with people, but also be able to flexibly change your mind very effortlessly. This will actually give you a lot more satisfaction in life, because when you're closed-minded, it's not comfortable. When you're closed-minded, you're basically suffering. When you're closed-minded, there's something you're struggling against. And really, if you want to live the best life possible, you're going to have to be fairly open. You're going to have to be able to try and understand what the people who are so against you actually want and are actually doing. And really, I want to stress that this is practical. Like when you see the opposing political party on TV, you have to actually understand why they think the way they do and why they behave the way they do, and why it's valid, why it's actually valid to do that, and the actual wisdom of that worldview. What is actually true about this worldview and that worldview? So, of course, I like to read a lot of books. You probably have seen. And I have books on basically everything. I have books on Buddhism, Christianity, all the religions, Islam, Judaism, Jainism, Hinduism, to science, to neuroscience, physics, human physiology, biology, chemistry, psychology, different branches of psychology. I have developmental psychology, humanistic psychology, I have therapy, psychotherapy. I have various philosophies. I have books on business. I have books on systems thinking, systems science. I have books on scale, literally scale right here. I have books on leadership. I have books on relationships. So this sort of openness and flexibility is a skill to actually develop. It's not like this thing where it's like, oh, I'm open-minded and we're also open-minded and blah, blah, blah. Actually, the human mind is very closed-minded. The human mind is a very closed and rigid thing until it becomes psychologically evolved enough. Now, I'm going to erase this belief system. I hope you get the point that, every belief is interconnected. When one belief crumbles, this belief crumbles, this one goes too, and usually a new one takes its place. So closed-mindedness, gotta face the camera when I talk, closed-mindedness is actually a psychological mechanism for defending your actual sense of self and your sense of being a physical living entity. So not only that, not only just closing your mind, but also acting like you already know. Acting like you already know what things are, which is just another belief. Acting like we get it. We know what the things around us are. We know what reality is. We know what's going on right here and right now. This is also a delusion. This is also a way of defending the current beliefs and ideas you have about what the world is. Because in 400 years, 500 years, 600, 700, 800, our ideas of all the things that we believe we already know are going to be radically different. Our beliefs about what objects are, what our self is, what consciousness is, what awareness is, what human psychology is like, what science is, what valid science is and what invalid science is, what the human body is, what the human brain is. These are all going to change. And that's why we have to be open to change. We have to be open to radically new ideas that contradict our own and begin to try and get what can be true about it rather than struggling against a specific group of people for the rest of our life. I got the hiccups. So when we're born, and we're born into a specific environment with a specific tribe in it, we adopt the beliefs of our in group, our tribe. Because these are the people who are going to take care of us and help us to live. And if we piss off these people, it's going to be a lot harder for them to give us the safety that we need, the food we need, the love we need, the connection we need. And we really need that stuff in order to live. So we begin to sacrifice our authenticity, our curiosity, our wonder for survival because we get scared. And I really want you to get that really in your own life, that the beliefs you have are very deeply dependent upon the place you grew up in, which is very arbitrary. You could have just been born somewhere completely different, and you would have held very different beliefs, and you would have really thought they were true. And that really to think that the way you're seeing the world is the true way is one of the stupidest things that you can possibly think of. It's one of the stupidest things you can possibly believe. So already knowing what the world is basically just your beliefs imposing themselves onto the world, you projecting your beliefs onto the world again, and is just a way to ignore, close, and defend your own ideas and your own mind. And actually not knowing, creating a sense of not knowing and a sense of mystery and a sense of curiosity begins to open up our mind to new things, to being able to see new things about the same old apparently mundane objects or any subject whatsoever. Now, I want to talk about this idea of stages of growth. So here, I'll draw a spiral. And we'll say that we start right here, that we climb the spiral, and we'll say it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. When people begin to move up into these more complex stages, really, their mind becomes more open. They have higher quality values. They actually do become more loving. They become more caring and actually also empathetic. And a lot more, they become better systems thinkers. That's really when self-actualization, self-transcendence comes in at the higher levels of development. Now, without open-mindedness, we actually can't grow. We will get stuck, let's say, right here. And when our mind is closed to a lot of the other ideas, it's not that we're also just going to get stuck in a particular place. What's also going to happen is that we're going to develop a shadow, basically an unconscious part of ourself that is going to continuously create suffering somewhere along the various value systems, the various levels of development. And you can notice this in yourself. You can notice that there is some group of people that you probably don't like too much. Not that it's like a racist thing, but that it's like you think that this group of people is just crazy. That how could they believe something so utterly foolish and ridiculous? And when you're doing that, you're basically implying that your beliefs are the true one and that what they think is stupid. But I really want you to get that when you're doing that, you are creating a bit of a shadow around this situation, and your mind is sort of stuck in that place, that this closedness, this sort of judgment, this rigidity in your mind is actually causing it to misunderstand reality, to misunderstand how the world works, to misunderstand valuable new insights and potential information. So open-mindedness is a skill that actually has to be developed. There's no way around it, and one of the safest things you can do is basically just assume that you're very closed-minded and that there's a long way to go in terms of open-mindedness, that there's things that are true about the world that you can't even begin to fathom because to your current belief system, it just doesn't make sense. To your current model of reality, the information doesn't actually fit into it. The information that is true just simply doesn't fit in to your belief system. And you can think of also this phenomenon as, let's say, like a puzzle piece. And that when there's incoming information, the information that we open up our mind to, okay, that looks very suspicious, is, okay, I gotta redo that. That was awful. The information that we open up our mind to is the information that fits into our current web of beliefs. And that when we have something that, my God, it's just, these look too suspicious. When we have some kind of puzzle piece that doesn't fit into our current web of beliefs, we'll say that this right here is our current web of beliefs. We actually do not have the level of sort of cognitive complexity to be able to understand what this is. It's just a sort of very vague thing. It's a very unknown thing. It's very unknown. We're very clueless about it, actually. And because we're clueless, because it's unknown, it comes across as very threatening to this. We don't open ourselves up to it, and we demonize it. We try to basically push it away, act like it doesn't exist, cover it up, eradicate it, and think that it's just invalid by closing our mind, by sort of judgment, by attacking it, by struggling against it, basically by struggle and resistance to it. Whereas the information that could fit in our worldview, it fit in smoothly. It fit into our mind smoothly. And you can obviously see that these two pieces fit together, and this one doesn't fit with this. That's what I'm implying. So our belief system doesn't really work like this objective thing. It really just doesn't. It's a lot more to do with survival, and it has a lot to do with the sort of conditioning that we received when we were very young, and how our brain wired and formed, and the things that we had to adopt, and the things that we had to do in order to survive when we were very young. And we can change a lot of that. It's very flexible and fluid, depending on if you want to make it that way. But for the most part, what usually happens is people just get stuck in it for their whole life and then they die. And to me, that kind of sounds like shit. That sounds horrible. And it just sounds like a very foolish way to live life. It just sounds like I'm missing something. Like there's something incredibly important that I'm missing out on if I'm stuck with basically this framework of reality that I adopted when I was young, whether it was atheism, Christianity, liberalism, conservatism, whatever it is. That only a very specific and biased amount of information, very, very specific amounts of information that is also very biased, will be the only information that can fit into our mind. And that this is actually a serious problem when it comes to developing yourself, when it comes to getting along with people, when it comes to feeling good, when it comes to just being able to talk to someone who's radically different and actually connect with them. You're just going to miss out on a lot of important and crucial information if you can't have these very adaptive qualities. You're just going to be foolish for the rest of your life, basically. And really, I would urge you to actively do something about it. Like actually, maybe read some psychology, read some science, read some Buddhism, read some Christianity. Like read the actual saints of Christianity, like John of the Cross or like Saint Teresa. I love John of the Cross. Read some very classic Jesus quotes. Read some, biology. Read some various philosophies. Read some relationship books. Like actually do something about it. This video is just an introduction. This video is basically a very shallow introduction too. This video is not in depth enough for you to really understand what I'm actually trying to get you to understand. Now, of course, the best way that I personally believe, is the best way that I think to open your mind. Basically, one of the best techniques that I can tell you is meditation. Now, meditation is fantastic for gaining direct insight into the workings of your mind, into how you construct anger, how you construct a lot of your emotions, a lot of your beliefs, how you close your mind, how you even open your mind, and the actual feelings and the emotions associated with being closed versus being open. It's very important for emotional intelligence and self-awareness. It's very important for actually clearing out stuck emotions, things like that actually prevent you from really enjoying life. And it can really get you to examine the beliefs that you have in a very clear way and in a very detached way to the point where you feel safe enough to let them go. Reading books, of course, and exposing yourself to new information is very good. I have a very good video, What Kind of Information is Important. You can check that one out. But other than that, I believe that's it for this one. Closed-mindedness as a defense mechanism. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. And other than that, take it easy.